All right. Let me go ahead and disable Spotify here. And let's see, here we go. All right. Let's see. Okay. All right. Here we go. Hey, everyone, and welcome to The Webline, a podcast about Spider-Man and his amazing world. Here, we discuss all aspects of our favorite wall crawler in a fun, informal, but informative forum. I am your humble host, the Spidey Librarian, and today we're going to do our second ever character deep dive with Miles Morales as our subject. My friend and webcomics creator Isaiah Broussard and I got together earlier this week and discussed this newest iteration of the webslinger and his impact on the Spider-Man mythos. I'll play that discussion for you when we get to the main segment, so stick around for a fun and enlightening discussion. Be sure to subscribe to the Webline on your favorite podcast service and leave us a like, review, and follow where appropriate. If you're on a service that doesn't carry the webline, let me know just by shooting me an email at spideylibrarian@gmail.com, and I'll do what I can to get it pushed out to you. Now, before we do a daring dive into our timely topic, it's time to dish on the latest spiderific developments of the last week with our knockout news segment, The Bugle News Flash. We've got a lot of news items this week, a few revolving around Spider-Man 2. I suppose it helps that San Diego Comic-Con has been happening this week, so that's why we've got quite a bit of news. Surrounding Spider-Man 2, the upcoming video game that I cannot wait to get my hands on. On Thursday, they did a little preview of Venom, including a little bit of a talk with Tony Todd and his take on the villain. But then they kind of just blew the door open on, I believe it was Friday, and showed the full story trailer, which I have watched and will be posting a reaction video to my YouTube channel in the near future. But wow, does he look good. It looks like it's going to be a really good story. And it doesn't leave a whole lot of wiggle room as to who Venom actually is. There's been a lot of debate raging about, is it Harry? Is it Eddie Brock? I believe the developers have said that it's not Eddie Brock, but I don't know that I always believe the developers because people lie sometimes. I will say that the story trailer does seems to confirm that Harry is actually going to be Venom in this story. So it may happen. It might not happen. We'll see. We'll find out on October 20th when the game comes out. Sony also announced a PlayStation 5 Spider-Man 2 bundle, which includes a themed console cover and then themed controllers with the same design. Now, as best I can tell, I didn't get crystal clear confirmation on this, but it looks like the case is basically something like a wrap or something like that you can get for your console, and then the controllers themselves, though, those aren't covers or wraps or anything. Like, you actually have to buy those controllers separately. So I don't know what I'm going to do. I mean, I want all of it, but can I afford all of it is the big question. So, but it looks like there is a lot of fun developments for Spider-Man 2. I cannot wait to play it, and hopefully you can't either. Let's see. The Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse digital release date has been revealed. It looks like it's going to drop on August 8th on Amazon, and apparently you can already put in pre-orders for it. We still don't have any word on a physical release date, and of course we still don't know anything about the release date for the actual release date for Beyond the Spider-Verse. They say it's March 29th. Nobody believes them. I don't believe them. We'll see what happens. Tom Holland has spoken about his apprehensions with continuing on as Spider-Man. He says that he is excited about the fourth film. I believe he is still like kind of in the midst of a break that he's taking from acting. But he is apprehensive because the way that No Way Home ended, it ended on such a good note. They really kind of crushed it, knocked it out of the park, whatever superlative positive you want to use to describe it, that the temptation to leave on a high note is definitely there. So I am hoping that he continues to stick with it. But I also understand, like, if he doesn't want to continue doing it, I mean, that's completely understandable. Actors do have a fear of being pigeonholed, and so we'll just have to see what happens. So, let's see. Finally, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is coming to Disney Plus on August 11th. Disney Plus continues to add Spider-Man and Spider-Man adjacent films to its holdings. I think this is a good thing. But I also think that a lot of people, we want it all. We want No Way Home. We want Far From Home, and we don't have them yet. It does join the Raimi trilogy. It will complete the web duology. And then, Spider-Man Homecoming is on there. And then, I mean, I guess Venom, if you want to count it. but yeah, I'm really happy. I'm a Disney Plus subscriber myself, and I think that having all the Spider-Man films in one place is a good thing. I think I also have mostly purchased my own digital copies, like through Vudu, but that's just because I gotta collect them somehow, right? So, and that is all the Spidey news for this week. All right. Welcome to today's main segment, the character deep dive for Miles Morales. Joining me is Isaiah Broussard. Oh, wait, hold on. That did not happen. I apologize. This is going to have to be edited out. Okay, all right. Apparently the script is wrong, and that is okay. So we're just going to go ahead and what's that word? Improvise. There we go. So, anyways, I had the opportunity to have a conversation with my friend Isaiah Broussard about Miles Morales earlier this week, and we got into his impact on Spider-Man and comics in general. We talked about him in other media. I talked a little bit about some of the more significant Miles Morales storylines and just kind of got his read on them and everything. It was a fun conversation, and I'm about to play it for you right now. So if you'll hold on, we will start the segment. Enjoy. I'll see you on the other side where we will wrap up the show, and I'll see you then. Welcome to today's main segment, the character deep dive for Miles Morales. Joining me is my friend Isaiah Broussard, webcomics. Oh, hold on. I need to edit, or I need to I had the wrong scene up at first. These things, like, I wouldn't have to think about this if this was just a straight up podcast, but All right, here we go. All right. Okay, here we go. Welcome to today's main segment, the character deep dive on Miles Morales. Joining me is my friend Isaiah Broussard, a webcomics creator and a fellow Spider-Man fan. Isaiah, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. How about yourself?
Doing pretty good. Very happy to be here and very happy to have you with me. Now, before we get going on Miles, would you share a little bit about yourself with my listeners and your webcomics, Transyltown, and any other projects that you're working on?
Yeah. So as you guys all know, my name is Isaiah Broussard, a web cartoonist. One of my longest running projects is called Transyltown. It's about this kind of shy and awkward vampire boy and his best friend that's a slayer and the wacky, sometimes creepy adventures that they go on. That one's actually recently wrapped up, and I will be releasing the final volume for that within the next few months. Other than that, on my website, brasscomics.com, you can check out some of the other works I've made. There's an editorial satire cartoon called Crackers and White Wine, and a fun sci-fi funky adventure called The Funktastic Adventure.
And I just brought up the icon for that character so people can see what he looks like. And I dare say he looks remarkably like you.
That's quite unintentional. I wish I could grow facial hair like that.
Ah,
Um,
okay. No, the struggle is real. I get that. I get that more than I care to admit sometimes. So, so what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about Miles Morales in as much depth as we can get into. Miles Morales is a favorite character of mine, and I definitely remember when he kind of came onto the scene. I was really excited, but apparently a lot of other Spider fans were not. And so I think the first issue that we're going to talk about with regards to Miles and his deep dive and his impact on comics overall is basically his introduction. Just kind of the like how he came to be like how he came to be in the minds of the editors at Marvel. Um, so Isaiah, how much do you know of that process?
so I know a bit about the process. I was a big reader of Ultimate Spider-Man, but I dropped reading the book maybe about a year or two before Miles became the main character of the series. Um, but in his inception and in his growth in popularity, I started researching kind of the creative process of him. So I know a little bit about
So my understanding is that the kind of like kind of epigenesis of Miles, the idea for a Spider-Man character who happened to be black was it started in the minds of Marvel editorial with the election of Barack Obama in 2008. And that was kind of like talk happened for a little bit and then it kind of died down. And then when the idea of a new Spider-Man movie, the ones that eventually went on to feature Andrew Garfield, came out, like when those talks started happening, basically Donald Glover basically kind of repopularized the idea of a black Spider-Man by saying that, hey, I would like to play Spider-Man, essentially. And I just remember, that didn't happen, but I remember there was a whole kind of brouhaha about it. It was there were a lot of people who were saying, "Oh yeah, that's a thing that could totally happen. Why not do it?" And then I remember the other reaction, and um, I don't know how Spider fans at large at the time were reacting, but I could tell you how some pundits uh, on TV were talking about it, and how some people even in public office they were not happy. They were like, what? Spider-Man is a white man. And I was like,
it.
if you
You
put
know,
on the
and
costume, you know?
it's so foreign thinking back to those times where a recasting of a character as a person of color would be this talking point on news and political channels. And I find it great that we live in a time and day now where that happens less often, right? We have
Right.
Zazie Beetz playing Domino now.
Yes.
And then we had our third black Catwoman. I don't know why people were upset about Halle Berry back in the day. They forget about Eartha Kitt. Uh, but yeah, I'm glad that that kind of doesn't happen anymore. But I think it's really fascinating because I don't know how much I buy that um, the fervor over Donald Glover was part of the process, just because the timeline seems kind of too close to each other. And I also kind of remember that happening, and it was less like Donald Glover being like, "Yeah, I'd like that role," and more like one of those like internet fan casting things that really caught on. And I think it was one of those, Twitter things where or Tumblr things where um, an idea gets really popular, and then it kind of gets into our heads like that was a true story. But I think that kind of started off as like a fan casting thing that everyone was kind of like, whoa, Donald Glover really actually kind of works. And it got around to Donald Glover, and he's like, yo, I'd like to do that. Um,
And yeah, and I think what happened is the fervor did die down. And I think as a nod, I don't watch the show Community, but apparently I think the season 2 opener episode basically featured, like, as a nod to that whole thing. Donald Glover's character was basically wearing like a Spider-Man pajama suit, and apparently Brian Michael Bendis took a look at him and was like, he he looks good, and that's kind of where, at least popularly, that's what initiated the let's make a Miles Morales character to succeed Ultimate Peter Parker after after he was killed. Um,
so the story that I heard
mhm.
about his conception and sometimes these when creators go back and they talk about um, their creative process, especially when it becomes like a famous character, some things get a little exaggerated upon or maybe embellished a bit. But I remember hearing that the idea was going back to an old concept of like Stan Lee's, that he wears a full face mask because anyone can be Spider-Man. But of course, in this day and age, like having Spider-Man be just like an average white guy behind the mask doesn't really represent that anyone can be in the mask. And so, like I had heard that that's kind of like where they started with that idea, is why they ended up picking a character of two national descents, Puerto Rican Black American,
Yes.
um, for the next Spider-Man.
I mean, that's actually an interesting point. That like, whether or not it's true, it's kind of one of those things. Like, it doesn't matter. It's the message within is still the more important point. At least from my own standpoint. So, um, now Miles's origin, he started off as an Ultimate Comics character. He he basically kind of appeared. I think it was in Ultimate Fallout issue number 4, which unfortunately I wasn't reading and collecting comics at the time, so I don't have that issue. But but I do remember reading it probably through like Marvel. What is it? Marvel Unlimited. I don't know, the app that you can subscribe to. I used to have a subscription to it. And what's funny is that after Peter Parker had died, there were people that were like, giving tributes to him posthumously and everything. And then I think this criminal named, like, I think his name was like Kangaroo Man, was sticking up someone in an alley, and this person in a Spider-Man costume appears and beats him, like actually beats him. And then after he rescues the person upon whom the crime was done, I don't remember if it was a mugging or something like that. The person that he saved said, look, I don't want to sound ungrateful, but I feel like that costume is in really poor taste," or something to that effect. And so there's this really famous panel of Miles after I think he's alone, and he's pulling up the mask, and he's basically saying maybe the costume is in poor taste. And I just remember reading that, and I just remember laughing because even though we've got this moment of this person replacing Spider-Man, this is supposed to be a big kind of really epic, you would think serious moment, and it's leaning a bit into the humor, which to me is very, very Spider-Man. Did you ever read that scene? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I never actually read Miles's first appearances in the comics at all.
It's
But that is very Brian Michael Bendis. I mean, the Ultimate Spider-Man books that I read, the original stuff was hilarious. So
Oh
like,
yeah. Yeah, and a
yeah.
lot of people have some issues with his dialogue style. I don't, but I just really like what do they call it? I think they call it decompressed or something. And I guess that means like he takes many panels to say little things in various scenes or something like that. I don't know, but I've never really had an issue with it. I kind of like the pacing for Ultimate Spider-Man. Um,
Me
but
too.
but when Miles took over, he basically, I think what did he do? He basically asked, like, I think he found out who Peter knew, and I think he approached like Gwen, um, like during the big funeral event and everything, which was, I don't know, that was epic for its own reasons.
Gwen came back to life.
What?
I
No.
remember her. So I stopped reading Ultimate Spider-Man probably around the time I think she was killed by Carnage.
Oh yeah. Oh wow. Okay. Yes. She was killed. She was killed by the Carnage symbiote, but actually, it was like it absorbed like all of her and basically became her, and so it was just kind of accepted that this was still Gwen Stacy.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
and I don't think she's ever like I could be wrong, but I don't think she's ever like done the whole like done the Carnage thing since then. I think it just kind of like she got killed and then like the symbiote kind of morphed into her and it had all her memories and I don't I need to reread that because I could be wrong about certain details, but that's what I seem to remember happening. But he goes and he asks her, I think, like during the funeral, he asks her about Peter because you find out that after he had gotten his spider powers, he was actually in the fight or he wasn't in the fight, but he was in the background during Peter's fight with Norman Osborn that eventually killed him.
Ah.
And he was
Is it one of the
really,
things that you can go back to the actual issue and like see, oh, there goes Miles, or is that like a retcon thing?
I'm pretty sure it's a retcon, but it's kind of one of those things where he was in a position to help and he wanted to, but he was also scared and decided to stay back, and so Peter died as a result, and so there's 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 this guilt that he's carrying around, and so he's talking to I think Gwen at the funeral and asks about what kind of a person Peter was and everything, and Gwen was like he's someone he's someone you want to live up to basically. And I like that moment simply because I feel like it's at least somewhat replicated in Into the Spider-Verse, where he's got the abilities and he could potentially help, but he also is like, this is not who I am. I'm not doing this. I'm getting out of there. And I don't know. It was one of those moments that I thought that they captured really well in the movie, especially it's a good example of not doing exactly what the comic book does, but sort of keeping true to the spirit of that moment. I don't know. Did you have any thoughts on that scene? I'm going to assume you've watched Into the Spider Verse by now. So
Yeah, I've seen both Spider-Verse movies. Yeah.
okay, okay,
So my thoughts on the scene is that the movie has the benefit of getting to weave an original story through
yes,
that concept rather than kind of throwing it into an event that already happened, right? Because in Spider Verse, you get to see him get his powers, you get to see him interact with his universe's original Spider Man and be completely out of his depth, out of his element, not really understanding what's going on. And then Peter dies, right?
yes,
And in that situation, it's less about like guilt and more about like, oh, well, like maybe I can take this up. And then through the course of the movie, you see him go through this hero's journey of like, I don't know if I can live this life. And then it's like, no, this is what I want to do. And then of course, his uncle dies and stuff. And then that gives him, because if you're Spider-Man, your uncle has to die. Uh,
apparently, yeah.
I mean, the
Although
new Spider-Verse
in
makes that pretty clear, right?
in the comics though, in the Ultimate Spider-Man comics, before they kind of folded Miles into the Prime comics universe, it's actually Miles's father who dies, and his uncle, who is the Prowler in the Ultimate Comics, actually is kind of like, yeah, like his uncle ends up dying because they fight eventually,
Mhm.
but for a while his uncle is almost like his number one villain too, because his uncle knows everything about him, and I like. Do you remember how he gets his powers in the comics?
It comes from a stolen spider, right?
Yes, it's a spider. His uncle, I believe, I think he was looting at Oscorp, and one of the spiders got into his satchel or backpack or whatever. And then when Miles came to visit him, the spider found him and bit him, and that became a whole like, okay, I'm this hurts. I'm gonna freak out and go discover that I can do camouflage. I can stick to walls and stuff like that. And so like he loses Miles in the comics, I swear. Because like if you go between the various medias, he loses different family members. So in the comics, he loses his dad, and
And I,
then
I thought he lost his mother too.
he loses his dad, he loses his uncle in a fight with him, and then he eventually loses his mother. You're absolutely correct. And then in the movie, he loses his uncle, who turned out to be not a bad guy, really. I mean, like, he definitely had his issues, but like,
Shades of
yeah,
yeah, like I mean that's the reality of like criminals, right?
yeah,
Like uh,
yeah,
there
absolutely,
there might be a decent person inside of that.
yeah. And then in the video game, I think it's back to like his father dies, I believe, right? But when they
Hmm.
folded him back into the comics universe, as far as I remember, I think everyone is. I think his mom, his dad, and his uncle are all alive. And so it's kind of one of those things. And you mentioned Across the Spider Verse briefly, and I'm very much kind of like, yeah, come on, can't we have a universe where Miles doesn't have to lose anyone in order to grow as a superhero? Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be really nice?
That's superhero comics in general. Is
Yeah,
a lot of
exactly.
them has to
Exactly.
die. Yeah, like it's kind of it's kind of a bad trope in some ways.
I mean,
But
I understand it as it comes with the territory sort of thing, but I don't know. I feel like that is just so overdone, right?
yeah, that's it's just cliche at this point. I'll have to check out some of the run where his uncle is one of his villains because I think what I really like about the movie or the movies is that family is like he's really close to his family,
Oh yes,
right? Um,
yes.
and so has an extremely positive relationship with his uncle. And I don't know if I like the idea of like that being taken away, and it's too close to Peter and Osborne
Yeah,
because even though they're not blood related, there's this kind of surrogate father son thing going on between them two, those two.
yeah.
Um, and I'd rather Miles have a an arch villain relationship that's not too similar to that.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I did a tier list a few episodes ago of like Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery, and again, I love Miles. I think he's a great character. I think he's a wonderful Spider-Man. But I remember thinking, I'm like, I don't really. I would be hard pressed to put together a real rogues gallery for Miles's Spider-Man in particular, especially if you were to discount any of the Spider-Man villains that quote unquote belong to Peter Parker, Because he's
Mhm.
faced off with the Black Cat, he's faced off with, I think, like the Rhino, the Scorpion, and it's like, yeah, but and so it's like the Prowler is kind of like I would almost say you pull the Prowler from Peter's gallery and plunk him into Miles's, because that's really kind of one of his only real big personal villains. And
Yeah.
I realize that Miles has only been around for like 12 years, Peter's been around for like over 60. So it's going to take some time, but I think by 12 years in, I I mean, I'm pretty sure Gwen Stacy had been killed off by that point, to say nothing of the rogues gallery that Peter had by that point, you know?
Yeah, I think the unfortunate situation that Miles is in is that he's the legacy character, and now he's in, you know, a new universe. Essentially, I mean, I don't know how well he's folded in, if he's just like one of the universe now, or if he is plucked from another universe at this point.
Well,
Retcons
actually,
are
we I guess we're moving into kind of the character development segment of this episode. And did you read Spider-Man?
no.
Okay, highly recommend that. That is an excellent story. Um it's where the Prime Comics Peter Parker, Earth 616, meets he actually gets pulled into the Ultimate Universe and he meets Miles. And so it's kind of them kind of figuring each other out and everything. It's wonderful. I believe it's by Brian Michael Bendis and the art is by Sarah Pichelli. It's really good, and it's a lot of fun. But you get this story where Peter is like, oh my god, I'm dead in this reality. He actually goes and he meets like Aunt May, and he's basically trying to get back home. And so Ultimate Nick Fury is aware of all of this and trying to help out. He and Miles fight the first time they meet, because apparently that is just the thing you do when you meet someone for the first time in superhero comics.
Yep.
And I mean, it's understandable. Like, who are you? Why are you wearing a Spider-Man costume? Why are the colors inverted? Like, I get it. And then Miles is just like, he's tiny in this one. He's like 13 at the time, so he's noticeably shorter than Peter is. And the fight itself is kind of hilarious. But like at the end of the story, Peter gets back to his reality, and he actually goes, huh, I wonder, like if my reality actually has a Miles Morales. And so he goes to, I think, Google, and, searches on Miles Morales. And this is like the one issue I have with this story. It just ends with Peter going, huh. And then it just ends right there. So it doesn't tell you one way or the other if there is a Miles Morales in the Prime continuity. Fast forward. Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm like, okay, but like Ultimate Reality Miles is now in 616 Marvel, right?
Yes, he is. We fast forward a few years. I think it was either during the second, because they did Spider-Man 2 basically. And I want to say I've read that one, but I'm not remembering the details of it. But I think it's during that one that you discover that Miles Morales does exist in Earth 616, but he's like BFFs with the Kingpin essentially, and has like helped Kingpin out like in the past and stuff like that. So when Miles from the Ultimate Universe, like during the Secret Wars and everything from like I think a decade ago, they basically just kind of like they mostly got rid of the Ultimate Universe. It just kind of disappeared. But
Yeah,
they
like, it was
yeah,
not great after a point.
yeah, but they
Oh
they
boy.
they grabbed Miles Morales and I think one other character. I think it was like Ultimate Versions Mr. Fantastic or something, who was like a villain by the time it all ended. But Miles is folded in, and I believe at some point he actually meets himself and like his counterpart. And so like those two are set against each other, I think multiple times. And so I would say that I would say that like those comics kind of deal with like Miles's evolution, and the idea that like this Miles, even though he very clearly, at least in terms of Marvel editorial, like belongs in this reality, he doesn't like, I don't know, like he's still got someone who was here first. And so it sets up a lot of potential questions about like identity and, who's the real me anyway, kind of situation. So but I haven't read them yet. I know about them because, I do a lot of research on these topics, and I've seen like some covers of like, Miles facing off against himself and stuff like that. And I don't know. It's all very out there, but it's all very like, maybe not quite Clone Saga ish, but like kind of a little bit,
So you
Everyone's
see
got to
that,
have their own Clone Saga, I guess.
right? The thing that feels really unfortunate about this, though, is that Miles is in this realm as a character where he has yet to really have stories of his own,
Yeah.
separate from the greater Spider-Man continuity, right? Which is why he's yet to have like his own unique arch, right? Like using the Prowlers, well, that's already, an existing Spider-Man character.
Yes.
And then even coming into the main Marvel universe, I've seen that he's being thrown into like different team ups already.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which is kind of like, well, no, let's give this character some time away from like it's like I get it. Like you want to put a bunch of the young heroes like Kamala Khan and Miles Morales together in fun things, but it also means that he doesn't really get to start exploring his own rogues gallery, his own kind of piece of the Marvel universe.
Yeah, and the pro like and unfortunately the issue with that is, at least for the most part, um the Prime comics just have such like they've got an entire catalog of like established heroes and established villains, and so not that they couldn't come up with new ones, but like it's probably a lot easier to just go, oh, let's pluck out Armadillo Man or Kangaroo Man, or I don't know, or generic person who uses fire, But it would be really nice to have at least a couple of like, maybe new people who are just kind of like, for Miles at least, like on the same level as like Doc Ock or
Yeah.
Venom or Green Goblin, like just for Miles, Like I think that would be
Yeah.
really cool. And I haven't seen any evidence of that so far. I would really like that to be the case though, because I really I don't know. Every Miles Morales story I have read, I've just always been like, this is a Spider-Man story. There's the secret identity thing, which you can argue that's played out. There's the whole doing what's right, even though it might not be easy kind of thing. There are so many themes and touch points that just make it feel like an authentic Spider-Man story, that I really want for this character the same types of things that Peter has had. And I'm kind of just wondering, like, how can that be possible in the universe that Marvel Comics already has established, you know?
That's why I'm kind of a big proponent of what's going on with the movies are just separate media for comic book characters in general, because you can kind of have a fresh start, right? It seems that the theme of Into the Spider-Verse is kind of that, like, he doesn't have to have the same experiences as every other Spider-Man.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, that's a big part of the second movie.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, I guess touching on that one, like, I actually really like the idea of the Spot becoming one of his big arch nemesis. Like, I, I remember when they said they were going to use the Spot as a villain in the movie, and I was like, that's a brilliant idea, actually, potentially. But like, even I wasn't prepared for that, like that story,
Yeah.
that relationship. I was like, at first I was kind of like, wait a minute, what? I created you, you created me, how? And then they told it, and I'm like, part of me was like, okay, I feel like you're just kind of tacking this on. But then I actually watched Into the Spider-Verse after seeing Across the Spider-Verse, and you know what I noticed? That
Oh, is he there?
spider, huh?
Is he there?
He's not there, But you know the spider that bites Miles?
Yeah.
Did it glitches?
Oh,
Did you notice that?
no.
I noticed it when I watched Into the Spider-Verse after watching Across the Spider-Verse, and I'm like, oh my God, they actually like they've made it so that it's not just I'm tacking this on. Like there's a
Yeah,
justification.
yeah, they probably weren't thinking about who the next villain would be, but they were thinking far enough that like they had an explanation for the spider to begin with.
Yeah. And so like I mean, I I don't even remember. Did I put the spot in my tier list episode? I don't know if I did. And I don't know. I want to say that I did. I can't remember. But I think at this point, like with the movies, I think at this point, if I did a tier list episode of villains for Miles, I mean, I think the spot would be more appropriately put there now than on Peter's list. You know, simply just because they've
Yeah,
established
because
such a relationship between the two.
yeah, he's just kind of a villain of the week for Peter.
Oh yeah, and he was a joke villain. Um, I was actually I only actually recently discovered this, but do you know the Spot's like civilian identity?
No, uh, I
He's
don't have much experience with him in the comics. I remember him in the '90s cartoon distinctly.
he's a scientist by the name of Dr. Jonathan Ohn, Ohnn, I think, or something like that. So think about his character and who he becomes, and then think about a particular phrase called Johnny on the spot. That is apparently what the writers were thinking when they created this, or whoever when they created him. I don't remember who it is offhand, but yeah, they created him from a cute little phrase. So, but he was a joke villain for a long time. Like he occasionally popped
Yeah,
up in the comics as a bit more serious and using the portals to a bit more deadly effect. But like in Across the Spider-Verse, I mean they're making him a legit multiversal threat, which again, a guy who can create portals, that makes all the sense in the world to me.
yeah, and I love that he's still a joke, and he's still like he doesn't have the gravitas of a big time villain. He just kind of like falls into that because he's smart enough.
Yes. No. And he uses that. You want to make a joke out of me? Fine. I'm going to prove to you how much of a joke I'm not. And by the end of that film, I mean, I was terrified of him. I was like,
Yeah,
ooh, no, 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 no. You're gonna be you're my nemesis. Okay, all right, we're nemesis. All right.
you got it, man. You got it. You wanted this. It's yours now.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So, um, but have you played the Miles Morales video game?
I have not. So I don't own a PlayStation, but
Okay.
you were mentioning to me that the PS4 Spider-Man game is on Steam. So
Yes, and
uh,
so is Miles Morales now.
Miles Morales is as well. Okay, so
Hmm.
those are going onto my list of games to get soon.
Yes. Okay. I think you're gonna love them both. The Miles Morales game is good, but it's also very short compared to Peter's game. In a
Right? It
lot
was
of
like
ways, in a
originally
lot. Oh,
DLC, right?
I'm sorry.
It was supposed to be DLC, right?
A lot of people say that it should have been DLC. But yeah, I actually recently did
Um,
a live stream where I played it from beginning to end, and I think that stream was like 9 or 10 hours long. So it's a short game if you want to just kind of plow through it. If you want 100% it, of course it's going to take longer, but um, but yeah, you can do that. Whereas I think Spider-Man is more like a 30 to 40 hour game. So, but
are they
definitely,
priced differently?
I think. Let me think.
Because I'll make my call. If Miles Morales is cheaper, I'll probably jump on that today.
Oh yeah, I mean, you could probably get Miles Morales. I want to say it's like probably like $30 or $40. So,
Okay, that's fair.
but it's a good game. It's worth playing. And of course, Miles Morales can do a couple of things that Peter can't. And I'm not just talking about the bio, like the Venom Sting and the invisibility. He's got those abilities, but he's actually got like a couple of move sets that were not available in the first Spider-Man game that you would think Peter would be able to do. So
Cool, cool.
yeah, he can
Well,
do. Yeah, Miles can do ceiling takedowns and stuff like that. So that's fun stuff. So, but
I enjoyed him a lot in Ultimate Alliance. He was busted in that game.
so what do you think overall of like the like Peter has got a bunch of like character relationships. Like he's got Aunt May and he's got Mary Jane and Harry Osborn whenever he's not dead or in Europe or something, and Flash Thompson and all that. And then Miles has got like his own, like he's got his family for the most part. At least in the comics right now, I think he's got everyone. I could be wrong about that. Don't hold me to it. But you know, he's also got his friend Genki,
Hmm.
who is really really cool. He's especially fun in the game. He's kind of like he's kind of like a social media whiz, and develops like an app that people can use whenever a crime is being committed. They can ask Spider-Man for help. So he's kind of like a tech whiz, and he helps Miles out with his Spider-Manning. He's really like he's the real man in the chair. You remember from Spider-Man Homecoming?
Yeah.
Like first of all, Ned is basically Genki.
Yeah.
I kind of wish that they had just called him Genki. Well, you know, I don't know. They took Miles's friend and gave him to Peter in those movies. Is kind of what they
Yeah.
did, you know. But like that's kind of what Genki does. Like he does what he can to help Miles out during his superheroing, and then there's of course like his uncle, who's the Prowler and all that stuff. But a lot of his relationships, I feel like they did what they could, trying to kind of like set up kind of a social structure that is similar to the one that Peter has, at least at first glance, and then try to go in different directions with it. I felt. What do you think?
I feel like the big difference that I see between Miles, at least in movie media, which is what I'm more familiar with,
Mm-hmm.
compared to Peter, is that Miles is more surrounded, right? Peter feels a lot more lonely, whereas his world consists of only his aunt, and
That's
then
that's actually a really I really hadn't thought about that. Like I think I've kind of felt that, but I think you're the first person to put it into words. Like it feels like he's supported.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and even in the comics now, he has Peter as like a mentor type character, right? Um, which is one of the things that I didn't like so much about like MCU Spider-Man, right? Because he is surrounded by it
right.
a lot of mentorship and stuff, and it's like, well, that's not really Peter. A lot of Peter's decisions come from guilt and loneliness.
And
Um,
I think that's the Peter we're gonna get if they continue with that character in the MCU. He's got the loneliness now, you know.
yeah, we'll see. I kind of feel like I like the last MCU Spider-Man, but I also kind of feel like its conclusion was leaving the door open to not having to deal with Sony anymore.
Fingers crossed, I suppose.
It was kind of like we will just kind of like leave this to being an open-ended conclusion, and if we get to continue to use a character, we'll continue from there. So I don't know. I don't know really what's going on with MCU right now. It doesn't really feel like they have like a solid plan for right now.
Well,
Um,
at present, everything is held up by the strikes, so there's nothing going on right now.
yeah, that's true.
So,
But yeah, like, and I would like to see, and even in the movies, right? He's got allies in the multiverse, um, with Hobby and Gwen and the
yes.
cast for the first movie. Um, And so that's what I really feel from his social structure is that he's surrounded by people that care and support him. Whereas Peter, he has the one family member, um, and then he would have this whole long thing with the Spider-Man getting in the way of his life with his significant others type of thing. But then the other people that you see him in his life are people like J. Jonah Jameson, right? Who is like, is he supportive? Um, at
uh,
least there's what's his name, Robbie Robinson. At least he's around,
it's
being a nice guy. But yeah, like Peter's, even his social structure feels kind of oppressive and lonely.
it's funny you should mention J. Jonah Jameson because at least in the comics right now, um, Peter has actually unmasked to Jonah, and told him who he is, and that of course just like exploded Jonah's mind. But once he got over it, he actually started trying to, like, he's kind of turned he's done like a 180 in terms of his PR with Spider-Man, and now he's trying to be like Spider-Man's biggest supporter.
Oh, that's interesting.
And apparently he's not very good at it, and it causes more problems for Peter than he actually solves. And I've seen one or two instances of that in the comics. I've only been sporadically reading Amazing Spider-Man lately, but like from what I've seen, it's just kind of this like comedic, like, oh my God, Jonah, no, why are you doing this kind of thing. So
Like an
ironically,
overly supportive like
yeah,
family member.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think I don't know, for me that's just that it's one of those things that I'm like, I like this. I like this little piece of evolution. We'll see how long it lasts. It'll get probably retconned next week or something. But yeah. I think though, in terms of if you like the idea of Miles Morales being a more kind of like supported Spider-Man in terms of like, the community and everything, I highly, highly recommend you play the Miles Morales video game because I think you're going to
I'll be
see,
looking for it.
yeah, I think you're going to see a whole lot of those themes in the game. And I really feel like it works, it works out really well. And I mean, if that's your read on the character, I mean, you've definitely got something in common with the people who are writing these games and the in the comics and everything. So I think it'll work out very nicely. So um,
Yeah, I'm gonna check out the games now that I know
yeah,
it's on something I can play.
I mean, seriously, when you play it, I want an assessment from you. Because again, I just got done. Like I've had Miles Morales for like 3 years, and um, I think one of the reasons that I didn't play it immediately is because I wanted to stream it. And at the time that it came out, there were all kinds of copyright strikes going up on Twitch and stuff because there were issues with the music in the game. And apparently, the music was new enough that there were streamers whose streams were getting like taken down midstream because of the music, like some of the music that was in there. And I mean, I have my own issues with that whole thing because it's like if you're getting paid for your music to appear in the game, then I don't understand why you're copyright striking people who are playing it. But whatever. But
I
um,
don't know.
but I think enough time has passed that I played it and I didn't get any copyright strikes or anything. So that's why I recently played it and I loved it. And I was just like, it's the next Spider-Man game is coming out in October, and so it was an excellent warm up for the next game because in the next game you're going to be able to play Miles and Peter, and you'll be able to switch between the two. So I think I mean we were going to do a section of Miles Morales in other media, but I'm pretty sure we've covered that pretty well already. What did you think of Across the Spider-Verse overall?
Overall, I liked it a lot. Are we allowed to talk about spoilers?
It has been nearly 2 months, and
Okay.
I personally have a 2 week embargo on spoilers for stuff like this. So, if you're listening, viewers, listeners, if you are watching and listening to a Spider-Man podcast and you have not yet seen Across the Spider-Verse, please go see it. Go see it.
Guys,
It's
Uncle
really
Ben
good.
does.
So, and I'm gonna go ahead and just let that count as the spoiler time. If people want to go ahead and switch off now, they can have done so by now. So please go ahead, spoil it.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to know how much freedom we had to talk about the show. I didn't, or the movie. I didn't know how spoiler free you wanted to keep it, but cool. All bets are off.
Yes. So, what did you think of it?
Oh, I loved that movie a lot. I mean, I've already talked a little bit about how I enjoy the themes of Miles can be a different Spider-Man.
Yeah.
That's what this movie's setting up, right? Like, Spider-Man 2099 is kind of like saying that every Spider-Man has to be the same,
Right.
but Miles is trying to find his way, and I can't wait to see what that's going to be like in the sequel.
What did you think? Because like this really I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it in this way, but like when that scene hit, I was actually really kind of struck when basically Miguel tells Miles effectively, you're an accident, basically. Like you're not even supposed to be here, and like I, it just kind of made me go, wow. Like I can think of kids who have had that that thing said to them,
Mhm.
and so like I was really just kind of like, dang, that is a vicious thing to hear in that kind of context. Like I don't know, did that particular scene strike you in the way that it struck me, or
I don't think it hit me really hard, and I think it's mostly because Miles's reaction to it is rejection.
just kind of
Like,
like, yeah, well, whatever, I'm here, kind of.
yeah, like it felt to me like Miguel was trying to, hurt Miles,
Mm-hmm.
and it was ineffective, right? And it is one of those things that I think if the scene was played as to something that was supposed to like that was going to be this harm to Peter or not Peter to Miles,
Mm-hmm.
it would have had some sort of deep impact. But like the impact I felt from it is that like, wow, Miles, Miguel, you're being really petty right now.
Oh yeah, that definitely. It was definitely a thing where I was like, that is a terrible thing to say to someone. But yeah, like following on the tail of it very quickly was that's also a very petty thing to do in the act of a desperate person. So, um,
Yeah, he was not getting his way, and he tried to be spiteful.
no. Um, but yeah, overall, I also really kind of identified with Miles in terms of being angry at Gwen and Peter B and a lot of the other friends that he made in Into the Spider-Verse, because he finds out, oh, well, not only did you have the ability to come and visit me and you never did, but then like there's been all this talk about him as the Spider-Man who, you know, essentially usurped another Spider-Man's destiny, and so like that was the reason that they were staying away from him. Like I really kind of identified with the moment where he's being chased by everyone, and Gwen, who is very clearly like, she knows what kind of she knows how she hurt him, and she's trying to do what she can to save him, and she catches him on her web line, and he like looks up and see who's caught him, and just like that look that he gives her, and
Hmm.
then he rips
Hmm.
the line, and I was just like, that hurt, but man, I get it, like I get where he's coming from. Like I don't know, what did you think of that one?
That was I felt that was powerful. I felt that um, maybe Gwen didn't have it coming because there's a lot of it that Miles doesn't understand about,
Yes.
like, her feelings about it, or even like Peter's feelings about it, right? Like
Yes.
they're trying to protect him in the best way that they can.
Right. I agree.
But he's not seeing it that way. And he's like, I don't blame him. He's not in a position where he can really see it that way. I think that Peter and Gwen have some work to do in the next film to mend their relationship with Miles. I think that something that all the Spider-Men are going to have to learn to do in the next movie um, is to kind of reject the status quo. You know,
Yeah.
um,
If
yeah.
if you go back to if you go back and ever listen to the first episode of this podcast, my guest at the time, Michael Hale of the KMP podcast, he basically I asked him, like, do you have any hopes going into Across the Spider Verse? And he said something that really kind of resonated with me, and I think kind of touches on what you've said, is that the he wanted the movie to basically have this overarching message of, and I'm censoring myself here, but basically screw your corporate storytelling, screw the way it's been, screw everything that you wanted to happen. Like, there are other ways to tell stories, and this is how it's going to be from now on. And
Hmm.
it turned out to be very prescient, because just a couple days after he and I uh, recorded that episode, we each went and saw the movie, and boom, canon events. And I'm like, oh, well, there's something you can flip the bird at right there. And
Is this the same thing that you mentioned? Made the prediction about Miles in 10 years?
no, that was Dan Gavosden from the Amazing Spider Talk podcast. I
Well, let me
believe.
get a moment. I definitely want to talk on that subject.
Oh, go for it, go for it. So in a previous episode, Dan Gavosden, which, wow, that was just the most recent episode. Dan Gavosden came and guested on my podcast, and we got to talking about the most iconic Spider-Man stories, and of course, we ended up talking about the movies, including the Spider-Verse movies. And Dan said that he could see it in the next 10 or so years, Miles becoming kind of the preeminent Spider-Man, the one that the kids are talking about when they say Spider-Man, as opposed to Peter Parker. And based on what I have kind of gleaned, not only from my other friends that I've talked to about these movies for the podcast, but just from kind of the media in general. I know there's ostensibly the idea that Peter Parker is and always will be Spider-Man, but I mean, I think there's a whole host of issues that comes with that, especially when there's certain amounts of development on these characters that that reaches a certain point and then seems to get pulled back. And I feel like that is a thing that especially affects Peter, and I would argue to the detriment of newer characters like Miles and possibly Gwen Stacy and things. So, but yeah, if absolutely feel free to touch upon that, Isaiah.
Yeah. So the interesting thing I find about that prediction is that it's kind of already happening
Okay.
because, like, so they've changed Spider Gwen's code name, right? She's Ghost Spider now.
Yes, in the comics at least, but yes.
Yeah, she's even credited in the movie that way.
Oh, is she?
Yeah.
I didn't know. Oh, wow. Okay, no, I didn't know that. That's really cool.
Yeah. So that, like, once I saw that, I was like, that's really interesting. Um, are they going to do the same thing with Miles? And have they tried the same thing with Miles? And the comics have tried. They've given him a terrible name at one point, Spidey.
Oh, I
Just
think I remember that.
yeah. Um,
Uh,
but what they also found was that in market research, that to a significant number of Spider-Man fans, Miles is Spider-Man.
mm-hmm.
And so that's another reason why they've been finding it hard to kind of give him a new name, right? For Gwen, it makes a whole lot of sense. She kind of needs a new name.
Right. You can't call her Spider Gwen like ever.
Yeah, she doesn't even call herself that,
Yeah. Yeah, she's
right? It's
Spider
just on the
Woman.
cover of the books. It's for our sake
Right.
as the reader,
Yeah.
um, to
T- t-
separate her from
t-
every other Spider Woman.
yeah, talk about your meta narratives, right?
Right. So that one that's a change that had to happen. But Miles doesn't have to change names it, because he's not in the same kind of situation, and because everyone's kind of already accepted him as Spider-Man. And I think
Yeah.
what's going to happen until we reach that point where like, and it's going to take things like, and it's already happening with other media's movies, but it's going to take things like Miles getting his own cartoon, um, and that just being the new Spider-Man cartoon for a generation.
Right.
Um, but eventually, it's going to get to a point where Peter Parker Spider-Man and Miles Morales Spider-Man, at least in the comic books, are probably just going to be separated by an adjective.
One would hope.
Right? You'll have
What
your Amazing Spider-Man books, and we'll all know that that's Peter, and then we'll have our Ultimate Spider-Man books, and everyone will know that that's Miles. But for right now, there's Miles Morales Spider-Man.
So I know I've spoken about this in the podcast before, but I feel it also bears relevance here though. I feel like one of the things that they could do to kind of help like let this happen or help it along or whatever you want to call it is they could really kind of move Peter into if not like a father figure role. I know that they've tried that and then retconned it and stuff. If they would just kind of let him develop, if they would let him age, if you will, and even if he doesn't take like a father figure type of role, at least like a mentor type of role, I feel like that would be a big help, and it would
Yeah,
it would also open up the possibility of new stories for Peter as well.
yeah. I feel like the age of teenage Spider-Man is over
For
now
Peter.
that Miles exists.
Yeah.
Right? In the comics, teenage Spider-Man has been over for ages, right? But they've struggled to give him growth outside of his like early late 20s, early 30s,
Yes.
right? And I think that now that Miles is here, they can and they have started trying to pivot him in that direction a little bit. I know that he's owned a big company at one point and it's kind of become like Stark Light. Um,
Well,
and
that was temporary, and it was part of the Parker luck that he lost it. And actually, that corporation was actually formed by Otto Octavius when he was in Peter's
when he was
body.
superior.
Yeah, yeah. And then Peter came back, and suddenly he was the CEO of a big corporation, and then promptly lost it within a year or so. So,
You
you
feel,
know,
you feel like they have to always reset Peter to being poor and struggling.
I know, and it's one of those things that I really wish Marvel editorial would move past. And I understand there is a certain interest in trying to kind of protect him and make him last as long as possible. I get that. Like it's in their interest. He's a very popular character. They want to keep him around. But I feel like for the benefit of what they continue to create and evolve, that you have to kind of have these characters if you want to maintain a certain amount of verisimilitude. They have to be allowed to grow and to age.
Yeah, yeah. It's
But
like the X-Men are a pretty good example,
okay,
right? Um, because they get new blood frequently,
yes, yes, they do.
right? So characters like Cyclops have gotten to mature in age since his inception in the 1960s, right? Where he was a teenager back then.
Right.
Well, now I don't know what's going on with current X Men. It's been a while, but the last stuff that I was reading, he's you know, one of the figureheads at the school,
Yes. Yes.
right? So that's kind of what I would like to see more from Peter is this evolution from, struggling hero, that is now well respected within his community. Um, I kind of think it should be a point where like he is a member of the Avengers and Miles is the one having the street level
The one
adventures.
who's on the ground. Yeah, no, I think that could be an interesting setup, and you know, it could be fun. And again, it it would be beneficial for Miles narratively, and I feel like it would be beneficial for Peter as well. Because new types of stories.
Hmm.
So I don't
You
know.
don't have to have them struggling and dealing with the same loss all the time. How many times has Aunt May died?
um, and now that I've thought it, I have to say this out loud. Like I thought of Peter as a mentor, and for some reason the image of a coach came into my head, and so now I'm thinking like Peter Parker should be Marvel's version of Ted Lasso, which like
Right?
that like that's such a wholesome and funny show, but like in some ways I could see that working for Peter. So
I could see that working a lot because like Ted has his issues as a human being as
Mhm.
well,
Oh
right? Like
yeah.
I could see that is the perfect comparison to I mean like, and we kind of see that in Into the Spider-Verse with the Peter from the other universe, this broken down Peter who's like, oh, I'm gonna help this kid out. My life's a wreck, but let me help this kid out.
Right. No, it's just one of those things that I was like, oh yeah, that could be a thing. What do you feel overall is the big kind of impact and I guess legacy that Miles has thus far created in the what 11 or 12 years that he's been on the scene? Like I mean, this can be just stuff that uh, is personal to you, or just wider impacts on comics in general. What does it mean, Miles eventually popping onto the scene at Marvel for you?
So first of all, visibility of marginalized groups
Hmm.
in media, right? Like it's a big thing that you can have um, this half black, half Puerto Rican kid uh
Yeah.
be the new Spider-Man, right? And I think that's trickled out a lot into other media, right? With like the Flash TV show and Wally West being black.
Right.
Um, pardon me. Um, so that's one of the biggest things is that I think it's made it easier and more acceptable to bring more characters of color into the mainstream. I remember I had a conversation with someone a long time ago who was like, "Why would the thing be, changing a character into a person of color, or having a person of color adopt someone else's legacy? Why not just make up a new character?" Well, like historically, it's really hard for new characters to pop off.
It is.
Really, really difficult in the world of comic books. Um, it just it just doesn't happen very frequently. Otherwise, they'd be making up new characters more often. Um, and so that's a big thing. I think he left the door open to characters like Kamala Khan. Um, so I feel like that's his biggest legacy there.
Hmm.
Um, other than that, like bringing something that feels modern um, into comics, right? Like the art style and the culture that is on display in the Spider Verse movies is modern,
Yes. No,
right?
absolutely. Hmm.
Between him and Gwen Stacy, everything feels like it's for uh, current youth. Like they can relate to that, and in ways that characters that have existed since the 1960s just can't do. Just can't do. I mean, Peter Parker is a an image of a stereotypical nerd from the 1960s that, in honesty, that nerd stereotype never existed in the first place, right? So harder thing to kind of latch onto. What's easy to latch onto, Peter, are his everyday man struggles, right? Um,
Yes.
but Miles feels like a modern youth. And I feel like we need more of that, and we are getting more of that. I think Kamala Khan is a perfect example of that as well. Um, and so yeah, those are the two big things that I feel that Miles
My
has as legs.
my previous guest, Michael, from the very first episode, one of the things that he said to me that really kind of clued me in to why his, because he works at a college. He works with college students, and he said that one of the things that really help kids identify with Miles Morales, that that they never got that, that ability with Peter Parker, was the kind of like the lottery system, essentially, that Miles goes through early in his comic, where he gets into Brooklyn Visions Academy. And there's like, there's like, you have to qualify for a slot, and then it comes down to like, okay, who gets picked and who's not going to go, essentially. And
Mm-hmm.
apparently, like, that particular piece of Miles's story is something that enough of his students identified with, to go like, oh, okay, this is something that I really like, that I either know about it, or I've been part of it, or I know people who have been part of it. And so, it's just kind of one of those reasons, like, and I'd say a pretty big one, for why people, particularly younger people, are going to identify with and support Miles perhaps more than Peter Parker in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
you know and so it was just one of those things where I was like, that's actually very insightful. So, okay, well, I think we've more or less gotten to the conclusion of this segment. Isaiah, do you have anything else that you would like to say just about Miles Morales in general? Any points that you would like to make? Any stories that you perhaps enjoyed from this character, or anything?
You know, I can't wait to see what the next movie's gonna bring about. That cliffhanger was amazing.
Yes, it
So
was.
I am, you know, hoping that that movie comes out really, 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 really soon. Other than that, the only thing I have to add is that if any of you guys have not played the Ultimate Alliance games on or Ultimate Alliance game on Nintendo Switch, right? I'm gonna shill. I had a lot of fun with it, and Miles is busted, and he can carry you through the game. Super.
No, he was a fun one to play. Yeah, Isaiah actually carried me through Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 a few years ago on my birthday. I was doing a great big long stream, and he joined me to play Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3. It was a lot of fun. So, but okay. Well, Isaiah, I just wanted to say thank you for coming onto the podcast and talking some Miles Morales with me. And I do different segments for my podcast. So if you ever want to come back and talk some Spider-Man with me, you are more than welcome to. But
I'd be more than
yeah, but thank you for being here, and yeah, have a good one.
you too.
Take Okay, give me just a moment. All right, and we are back. Thanks again to Isaiah for joining me for that discussion. It was a lot of fun, and of course, I always enjoy doing these character deep dives, and many of the other segments on the podcast that I do. I believe that brings us to the end of the show. Again, my sincere thanks to Isaiah Broussard for guesting with me this week and providing his insights on this excellent character. Hopefully you had as much fun listening to us dig into Miles' character as we had in making it happen. If you enjoyed this episode of The Webline, please be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast on my YouTube channel, simply named Spidey Librarian, where the podcast is live streamed regularly and where I maintain a playlist for the live streams. The Webline is also available on audio services, so when you see us on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or another such service, please leave us a review and rating, and if you can, follow us. You can find me on my socials under the name Spidey Librarian on Threads, Twitter, Instagram, WordPress, and Twitch. And finally, if you'd like to shoot me an email, you can contact me at spideylibrarian@gmail.com, where I'll be happy to hear your thoughts, rants, and ideas. Who knows? Your email might be featured in an upcoming episode. Isaiah, my glorious guest for today's episode, is active on both Twitter and Instagram under the handle at iBroussardArt, IBROUSSARDART, and his webcomic Transyltown is available at the Brass Comics website. I'll have the link in the show notes and the live stream description. Be sure to join us next Sunday on the Webline, where I'll be flying solo for a special topics episode. The subject will be the upcoming and unofficial August 1st holiday we all hopefully know and love, Spider-Man Day. Thank you for listening, and until the next episode, I'll be wishing you a good day. Bye.